Uh, well, welcome everybody. It's really great to have you all here. As Colleen said, kind of our original mission here at NIMBioS was to focus on the interface between mathematics and biology. But over the last several years, we actually been doing more and more activities that focus on social sciences. We had several workshops like this one, several working groups. So it's really great to have this crowd of people here. So when the organizers put together the proposal for this workshop with the topics that we had in mind, so material causes of decentralized warfare, immaterial causes, and collective action problems. We also listed a number of questions that we'd like participants to focus or to at least to pay some attention to that. What data, theory, and models are available? What are empirical patterns that cannot be explained by existing theories or existing models? What kind of data we need? What kind of models we need? And what new modeling techniques can be or are desired? So mathematical modeling is a kind of important component of that vision. So why care about modeling? This is a kind of a sample of areas of expertise in this group. And as you can see, it's quite diverse. In some fields, like for example, in evolutionary biology or in ecology or like in molecular biology, mathematical modeling is widely used. In our areas, it's much less common. What I'll do next, I'll just show you a couple of slides that may be boring or kind of obvious to most of you, but just to reiterate the point that modeling is a quite legitimate way of scientific investigation. Theory building is one of these three general approaches that used to advance science. And there are different ways you can do models. It can be verbal, statistical, and it can be dynamical. So what models can do? Well, models can do a lot of stuff. Right? They can check validity of verbal arguments, check your logic. They can explain very complex phenomena potentially. They can identify crucial parameters. They can suggest new hypotheses to test. And this way they can guide empirical research. They can train our intuition, like working with a simple model, we can develop intuition about something much more complex. They can predict certain things. They can tell us what will happen under certain conditions. And that may be very useful if it's impossible to reproduce these conditions because it's costly or whatever. And under some situations, models, of course, can even produce new knowledge. They can tell you something that you never knew before. Of course, models are only as good as the questions that were posed, that they attempt to answer, and as good as the data that are available. So basically, that means that it starts, of course, with empirical work. And data and observations and general patterns, they come from empirical work. But models can potentially, again, be very useful. Actually, the understanding that mathematical modeling can be useful for studying social processes and historical processes is rather old. Nicholas Rashevsky is one of the pioneers in this field, and he was the founder, I think, of the Department of Biophysics in Chicago. But he published intensively on questions of social evolution, and he had that nice book looking at history through mathematics. So models can be useful for people doing empirical research, but also processes, historical processes and social processes, they can provide a lot of new questions for theoreticians. So that was something the quote, like 60 years old. So what's going on now? Now, actually, there is a lot of very exciting developments. There is the whole new science emerging called cliodynamics. Clio is the muse of history, and dynamics is studying of temporal processes. So basically, it's an attempt to look at history as science and develop theory, mathematical models of historical events. But it's not just modeling, it's also building big data type of approaches that would allow eventually to test theories about historical events the same way as, say, population geneticists do with about population evolution. Peter Turchin is one of the people at kind of the forefront of the whole movement. Yeah, there is this database shot, and there is the whole new journal, several years old, Journal of Quantitative and History and Cultural Evolution. So it's really a very exciting time for applying mathematical and quantitative methods to historical and social events. So what methods people use, where these methods are coming from? I think there are kind of three general sets of approaches. So there are some rather old theories developed in chemistry, like Smoluchowski equation, coagulation fragmentation theory, and some of these models can be applied and actually have been applied to modeling human warfare, for example, terrorist groups, how they grow and split. Of course, there is a lot of work done in economics literature. There is a game theory, there is contest theory, and there is a coalition formation theory that have been very useful. And a lot of stuff has been done in evolutionary biology as well. There is an evolutionary game theory, kind of analog of game theory. There are attempts to build models of group and multi-level selection. There is cultural evolution. There are different ecological models that can be applied as well. Here I have evolution, right? Evolutionary biology. So now question is why care about evolution and why use these mathematical models coming from evolutionary biology? Well, first of all, some of the things that are involved in warfare, like cooperation and altruism, well, presumably these behaviors evolved under ancestral conditions of warfare, if we accept this idea. Moreover, there are a number of psychological biases that modern humans have that are not necessarily related directly to warfare, to ancestral warfare, but these biases they are basically controlling our behavior. Aggressiveness, overconfidence, competitiveness, our drive for egalitarianism, effects of experience on our behavior, things like that. So bringing an evolutionary angle can be very useful and potentially important. I have a couple of slides here outlining some applications of these models for kind of describing historical social events that involve some kind of conflicts or warfare. There are models of territorial growth, right, and some rather old models that Rashevsky himself developed, and then more recent agent-based simulations like Peter Turchin with co-authors. We had a paper modeling the spread of historical empires over the period of 3,000 years, and it was pretty good. There are models looking at hierarchical structure of populations or groups. There is a lot of stuff coming from behavioral biology. Again, theory of coalition formation. Mike had a review paper with co-authors. There have been some attempts to look at the origin and maintenance of cultural boundaries between groups, the emergence and spread of ethnic markers. Boyd and Richardson and Michael Reif et al. We can apply some theory of biological theory of speciation to emergence of cultural division as well. These are very interesting attempts. Basically, people have been adapting ecological models to look at social dynamics. You can think, for example, of predator-prey system in ecology and look at elite and commoners dynamics in a society. And some of these models would predict cycles and things like that. There have been a couple of attempts to look at the emergence of social stratification and division of labor. And again, some of the ideas, methods, and models can be transferred from biology to these social processes. Okay, so again, these are three kind of main topics for the workshop. But of course, we understand perfectly, the organizers perfectly understand that the dynamics of this workshop can take kind of unexpected twists, and whatever will happen, it will be very interesting to see. So for the rest of my talk, I'll be talking. The rest of my talk I want to spend on a particular subject here, and it's collective action problems. So whenever we have group activity, and warfare definitely involves groups, fighting groups, or doing something together, we often find ourselves in a situation where economists call collective action problem. So if group members can benefit from the action of their group mates, well, there is always an incentive to reduce the effort or not to participate in this. And this is a realization that this indeed is a big problem, is rather old. Olson's book was published 50 years ago, actually, this year, on the logic of collective action. And this is a situation quite generic, and it represents a major challenge, a fundamental challenge for groups, both animal groups and for human groups. And this is a problem that has received a lot of attention. In economics literature, the discussion usually focuses on selective incentives and institutional designs. In evolutionary biology, there is also punishment where this kind of correlates with selective incentives, but there are also these biological factors, genetic relatedness, kin selection, reciprocity, reputation, and group selection. So how people study that? Recently, I wrote a review paper on this, and I was really amazed how many different approaches exist. It's an enormous field. There are dozens of books and thousands of papers. So basically, you can use it to build different models. You can look at situations where a group produces a collective good, or it's trying to preserve something. And these are kind of very different situations, very different models. You can make different assumptions about behavior of individuals. Individuals can maximize their payoff, or populations can evolve by random mutation and drift, or there can be some learning or some attempts to make to predict the consequences of events. So here I list like 4 or 5 different solution concepts, but basically these are different branches in this field. And then, of course, individuals can do different things. They can contribute to the production of a public good or collective good. They can punish others. They can do something else. Groups can be kind of pre-existing, or they can form as a result of certain processes, and that would bring this theory that I already mentioned, coalition formation theory. And then there is, of course, the effect of space. Some models look just at groups of individuals, say randomly formed, and space in this case is not particularly important. But sometimes it's spatial interactions, isolation by distance, that is very important, social networks, things like that. And then the way individuals make decisions, again, these are very different branches, like very popular and common approach that's been developed in economics a long time ago and has been used now in evolutionary biology. Individuals update their strategies simultaneously, right? But when there is a whole different branch of studying collective action problem, it's where these decisions are made sequentially, and some new effects like critical mass effect or some threshold behavior can be observed. So there is a lot of different ways of doing that. When people look at these models, there are a couple of different focal points, right? Most of the work that's been done looks at strategies that are optimized in a certain way, or some behaviors that are optimized. So basically, in the model, you would kind of postulate the existence of certain strategies, specify costs and benefits, and then you see where it goes. But it's rather complex, the approach that results in rather complex models. A bit simpler way of doing that is, instead of postulating these strategies, just postulate some simple heuristic rule for behavior. For example, like this threshold model, very popular model of Granovetter, basically says that individuals will join a potentially risky activity, like a ride, if a certain proportion of our individuals are already engaged. And this last one is, I think, most complex mathematically. It's where, so here we postulate the existence of certain rule, right? And in this last case, we try to see how these rules evolved, how they emerged. And these rules of behavior can depend on a social situation. For example, here I'm trying to illustrate a situation where there is a conflict and individuals can escalate or can withdraw. And the decision to escalate depends on the strength between the focal individual and his or her opponent. So that will be the social environment, the difference in strengths. But when on top of it, and on the y-axis we have the probability of escalation. But on top of that there can be different social role. Like if there is a conflict about some unit of resource, the focal individual can be the owner, or it can be an intruder trying to take it from the owner, or it can be an observer. So here we would look at individuals. Each individual will be described by 3 different response curves depending on a given social situation, and then we would look how these response curves evolve and trying to understand what it tells us about about human behavior. Okay, a generic approach for studying between group conflict and warfare, in a sense, can be probably captured by this model that kind of Sam Bowles popularized, and then many other individuals have been using. So we have a population. It's composed by different groups. There are different individuals of different type, cooperate or defect, for example, and then cooperation is individually costly, but groups that have more cooperators can spread. So there is a group selection. And so the main question here would be, can cooperation or altruism spread in the population? And Sam's answer is yes, it can happen by group or kin selection, right? But in his case, it requires a sufficiently high genetic relatedness between within group members. All right, and that's something that I think Richard mentioned, that actually this genetic relatedness is not that high as genetic data show. And then we can introduce some additional things. Reproductive leveling, that would spread the cost of cooperation among all members of the group. You can look at the co-evolution of altruism and parochialism and add institutions. Okay, so that model was very simple. And of course, well, there are a number of assumptions, and you can question one or another or try to generalize it. So what I will do in the next 10 minutes that I think have left is to look at this one particular generalization of this. And I think it's very important. And here I will look at this collective action problem in the presence of heterogeneity between individuals. We all are different, right? We have different strengths, we have different motivations. If we kind of go in and trying to get something, we're probably going to get different shares. So this variation is extremely important, right? And in animals, we have ranked societies. There's alpha male, beta male, and so on, and shares are different. So a typical approach is to neglect this variation. Right. There is some work, and actually quite substantial work on economics literature on collective action problem in heterogeneous groups, but when you start looking into that, it's quite messy, and often the conclusions are quite contradictory to each other. So what I'll do next, I'll outline the model. It's a project to understand what really happens there. And the general setup is quite similar to the one that Sam Bowles and others have been using. The difference is this one. I introduce variation between individuals, for example, in the cost that they pay, or in the initial endowment that they have, or in their strengths, right? And then I say that their behavior is conditioned on their rank in these variables. So how it works? Well, just assume, again, we have these groups, and individuals make an effort to achieve a certain goal, right? To go and hunt big animal, or go and fight with another group, right? So X will be the effort of individual I. And then we have to specify the group effort. One standard approach is just to sum up individual efforts, but I will also look at a more complex model, and it's coming from economics, where there is this coefficient alpha that can be interpreted as a measure of collaborative ability. If alpha is very small, individuals cannot collaborate, and basically big X is about the same as the strongest effort. It's like the strongest link model. If alpha is 1, we have an old model. But if alpha is bigger than 1, then actually the group effort can be significantly bigger. If individuals are able to collaborate efficiently, then the group can be stronger than just the sum of individual efforts. So I will have this alpha coefficient, and it will play an important role. And then we need to specify the type of collective action what we look at. So here what I do, I introduce just 2 general types of collective action that I believe our ancestors, most definitely were involved in. I will call one of them us versus nature. So here basically the success of the group in the collective action does not affect what our groups are doing or getting, right? And I will say that the probability of success of the share of the overall reward is a saturating function of this. And the our model, I will call it us versus them. It's a standard model in economics. So here, I just take the ratio of my effort and all other groups, and that gives me the proportion of the reward I am getting. So in this case, my win, my group's win is another group loss. So these are 2 different situations. So you can, in terms of warfare, right? So here, for example, definitely different groups will adapt to each other, but that model, although I call it us versus nature, but in principle it, I think, can be applied to situations when one of the opponents is not flexible enough, cannot react quickly. So it may be under some conditions even viewed as a conflict between a small group and a bigger group, like a state. Okay. And then finally we have to specify the payoffs, what individuals are getting. And the payoff is like baseline payoff, initial endowment. And when I introduce this share of the reward going to individual I, that's valuation, right? That's coefficient B and C, benefit and cost. P is from the previous slide. And there is the cost of contributing, and I have parameter beta just to have a nonlinear function, to have a general model that would allow both for linear and nonlinear payoffs. Okay. And that's basically it. So it's kind of a quite standard model, except that, again, there is a difference between individuals in valuation of strength or cost parameters, and also in endowments. And I allow for nonlinearity in the cost function, potentially, and in the benefit function. And then we can study it. We can do it analytically, and there is a lot of analytical results. We can do it numerically. And what we want to do, we want to predict how individual efforts and how group efforts, how individual payoffs and group payoffs depend on what we've got. If groups are homogeneous, the results are quite simple. So basically, in the case of us versus nature game, individuals will cooperate if reward is sufficiently big, but they will withdraw completely. There is a threshold, right? In the case of us versus them, they will always collaborate. So that's one big difference that will show up later. Also notice that there is a group size at the bottom. That means that the bigger groups will make smaller effort. And again, it's something well known. So now I want to introduce inequality in this group. And the way I do it, I have a particular parameter delta that basically tells how rapidly the share of the individual drops, of the reward individual gets, drops with its rank. So small delta will mean equality, large delta will mean that the alpha individual gets the biggest share of the reward. Okay, so this is a way to get inequality. Let me skip that. So what happens here? And again, there are analytical results, but I'll just show you for simplicity numerical results. So let me walk you through. So here are individual efforts, and these are individual share of reproduction. The group size is 4, 8, 16. right? And different bars, they correspond to different degree of inequality. Low inequality here, high inequality over there, right? As in this case, on the left side, there is no group extinction. On the right side, there is group extinction. And the color corresponds to the rank. Red is rank 1, green is rank 2, and so on. So you can see here, in large groups, there is no effort. In smaller groups, there is an effort, but it's delivered by a single individual, by the alpha individual. As far as shares of reward are concerned, well, you see what happens here. Now I introduce group extinction, and everything changes dramatically. Now all individuals make substantial, efforts, total efforts are bigger, and individual efforts increase. So here is just the summary of what you said. Cooperation requires sufficiently big reward. Increase in reward side causes, of course, increase in the efforts, but inequality also increases the individual efforts, all right? And only some group members can contribute to that. If we add group extinction, that's the right-hand side, everything, all efforts greatly increase. And then we can look at inequality in nonlinearity and production and cost functions. So here I look at nonlinear costs, and you can see with nonlinear costs, basically the efforts become much bigger, all right? And if you look at how inequality affects the total group effort, if nonlinearity is weak, we have increase with inequality, but if nonlinearity is strong, we have a decrease in inequality with effort. Okay, and this is a case where I have synergicity, that alpha is playing the role, and again, the behavior is more or less the same. If there is weak nonlinearity, when there will be increase in the effort with inequality, but if it's strong, it will be decreased. Okay. And then we can look at us versus them games. And behavior is somewhat similar. The growth, you can see only single individual contributes, and there is increase in the effort with inequality. But here I want to draw your attention. This is the case with group extinction. You can see that the share of reproduction or payoff of individuals who are on top of the hierarchy becomes very, very small. It's much smaller than that of everybody else. So basically, with high-rank individuals, we make such a big effort that their payoff is very small, so they effectively behave as altruists. They sacrifice themselves for the benefit of the group. Okay, and then I'm running out of time, so basically the patterns are the same. And then we can generalize this in a number of different directions. We can introduce differences in strengths, differences between groups, and in sizes and evaluation, and also instead of simple evolution by random mutation, allow for myopic optimization and actually also add genetic relatedness. So very quickly, there have been a lot of work on collective action in many different animals, and Richard has mentioned some of this, and there will be more, I'm sure, here. And that prediction where the effort will be delivered by the highest ranked individuals is supported in a number of different species. For human psychology, there are experiments that show that indeed there is a genetic predisposition for cooperation, especially if there is external threat, if it's us versus them, rather than just us versus nature. And then there are some other factors. There is experimental work that shows that more competitive individuals, potential alpha, they always contribute more to the group effort. In some groups, hunter-gatherers and most aggressive warriors, we have reduced reproductive success. There are data on mortality in the US Army in Iraq, and in this case, again, leaders of platoons, they have the heaviest casualties. And then there is something else from equity theory that I will skip. So here are the general conclusions. The largest contributors towards the production of collective good will be individuals who have who are getting the highest share of the reward, who have the highest endowment, or those who have the smallest cost. Under some conditions, which individuals will actually end up with the smallest payoff. So they effectively sacrifice themselves for the benefit of the group. And then there is this question how the group size and inequality within the group affects this. Well, it depends. It depends on nonlinearity. Under some conditions, the total group effort increases with decreasing the group size and increasing inequality. But under other conditions, it goes completely the opposite way. And then there is this big difference between us versus them and us versus nature games. There is much more effort is predicted if it's direct competition with other groups. So between group warfare is extremely conducive for evolution of cooperation here. Thank you.
We have time for a couple of questions.
Hey, Sergey, I was interested, having seen Richard's talk before yours, I was interested in what he reported that the more dominant males in the group in the chimpanzees tend to participate more in intergroup conflict. And that seems, I know that he seemed to dismiss group selection as a way of explaining cooperation in chimpanzees, but it seems like your model would make that prediction. How do you feel like this?
Yeah, that model makes exactly this prediction, and I actually use his data for this. What I would say that group selection is not required. It's basically everything here is, what you have is what economists call a volunteer's dilemma. So it's not like prisoner's dilemma, it's volunteer's dilemma, and individuals are motivated. There are mutual benefits. So the effects I'm talking about here, they are observed even without group selection. But group selection, group extinction will amplify them tremendously.
Thanks, Sergey. I was wondering, your second paragraph here, the idea, the prediction of very low payoff for the higher-ranking individuals. So that's an intriguing model prediction. Do you have any empirical support for that?
Well, this one, right? Yeah. So, for example, here with hunter-gatherers, individuals on top of the hierarchy, they are paying or are expected to pay much higher costs when they are subordinates. For example, this example here, I would say that if indeed we have these social instincts to behave in a certain way, once you appoint an individual to be a leader, this instinct will kick in, and this individual will make much more effort than otherwise. So that's one potential interpretation why first and second lieutenants getting killed at much higher rate when they are subordinates.
And would you expect this to apply to humans and not chimps, or would you expect it to apply to...
It should apply to both, I think. Yeah, kind of. Well, you said that individuals kind of go on these patrols, right? And they pay much, they spend their energy, right? So in a sense, they are making more effort. Presumably they're more... we're getting higher payoff, but that's the question of the balance. But that's prediction, but this prediction really requires pretty strong between group competition. So if I have that graph over here, you see this is a graph without group extinction, and this is with group extinction. So this is a share of alpha individual, and it goes down with inequality and becomes very small relative to everybody else. Right? But in these two cases, without group selection, alphas making the huge effort, but their share is kind of comparable to what everybody else is getting, net the difference between benefit and payoff. Yeah, but that I think is general prediction. It emerges in all these different models.